The call to the home front also included the citizens residing overseas, showing the global and transnational character of the conflict. I will focus here on a quintessential transnational actor, migrant communities, which constitute an intersection point between their countries of origin and their host societies. Wartime posed to them a serious dilemma around the extent of the solidarity due to the homeland, especially in the case of the second generation born and raised abroad. At the same time, the strong connections with their new homes fostered the immigrants' active involvement in local public debates. I intend to tackle these dynamic exchanges, analyzing the mobilization and counter-mobilization of immigrant communities in Argentina and its local and global impact during the Great War. Argentina constitutes a privileged observatory to analyze these challenges because between 1857 and 1914, it received abundant migratory flows from Europe, which ranked the country second in the Americas behind the United States and largely overcoming other immigration countries such as Canada and Brazil. On the eve of the First World War, immigrants represent almost a third of Argentine population and were almost half of the inhabitants of Buenos Aires, the country's capital city. As a result, they occupied an outstanding place both in the warring nation's total mobilization and in placing the war issue on the local social agenda. Among the 27% of European population registered by the Argentine census in 1914, there were citizens from both belligerent sides. Immigrants from the warring nations reached almost 57% of that total, with an overwhelming predominance of those belonging to the Triple Entente, although a high percentage belonged to neutral states, mainly Spain. However, these figures should not be seen as an exact description of the immigrants' alignments with the belligerent states. Immigrant communities were neither uniform nor harmonic, but complex, crossed by regional, confessional, ethnic, and political strains, which conditioned the support to the war effort and set limits to the sacred union encouraged by their state's authorities. In fact, the war frequently served as a catalyst of diverse pre-existing conflicts between the communities and their respective governments, and as opportunities to renegotiate their relations. For instance, a long history of state persecutions prevent any solidarity with the Russian Empire from the Jews who had fled the country because of the 1880s pogroms, or from the Armenians emigrated from the Ottoman Empire. In other cases, the Great War renewed some ethnic minorities' claims for autonomy or independence. Thus, the Syrians in Argentina split up between two different national projects, one advocating a federal constitution for the Ottoman Empire, the other one in favor of abandoning it to create an Arab confederated nation. Along with the Lebanese and the Armenians, part of this community volunteered to join the Légion d'Orient to fight for the Allies in the Middle East. The Austrian-Hungarian Empire faced a similar opposition from some sectors of its overseas subjects, for instance, from the National Alliance of Czech countries, which promoted the independence of the ancient Kingdom of Bohemia and of the Hungarian Slovakia, and actively supported the Allies through different channels, including the enrollment as volunteers in their armies. Poles, Czechs, and Slavs later organized the Central Committee of the National Polish, Czech, and Yugoslavian Organization in the Argentine Republic. On its part, the United Kingdom coped with the activism of the Irish Catholic Association of Argentina, which expressed independentist and pro-German sentiments. To a greater or lesser degree, all the colonies exhibited internal tensions over the war. However, if it had divisive effects on some communities, in other cases the war led to the appeasement of the inner dissensions. For instance, the pro-Allied stance of Argentine public opinion fostered a siege mentality among the Germans of Argentina that favored unity during the entire conflict. In general terms, inside the communities, the signs of disaffection with the states of origin coexist with positive responses to the war mobilization. Thus, only a few days after the outbreak of the First World War, immigrant communities began to organize work committees, such as the Italian Work Committee, responsible for the coordination of the contributions to the homeland. Besides the most prominent members of the community elites, they included the official representatives of the belligerent states in Argentina. The work committees aim to centralize the resources collected by traditional community institutions and new associations specifically related to the conflict. The communities allocated the collected money to serve, in the first place, the needs of the family soldiers and, as the conflict was prolonged, those of the widows, orphans, and disabled. And in second place, their homelands, official charity initiatives, and war loans. These are the official posters of this collection of money for war loans. In general, the colonies gathered important sums of money for contributing to their native countries and became a factor of crucial importance for the continuity of the European states' war effort. In addition to the material contributions, the immigrant communities rendered another service to their countries in wartime, joining the armies in fulfillment of their civic duties. In all cases, the community's institutions exert pressures on the population able for military services, from dismissal or expulsion from certain associations or jobs, until rewards, grants for death, and guaranteed employment after their return. The response of the Central Empire's communities to the call to arms found an almost insurmountable difficulty in the British control of the oceans and its naval blockade. An indeterminate but non-negligible number of Germans and Austro-Hungarians could join the Imperial Army individually, but the official embarkation of contingents from Argentina was not possible after 1915. The German and Austro-Hungarian reservists who were able to reach Europe usually resorted to the use of false passports issued by legations of some European neutral countries such as Switzerland, Denmark, Spain, and Italy. However, this practice was early detected by the British diplomats, thus preventing its continuity. The following table can offer some elements to evaluate the results of the Allied military mobilization according to the demographic magnitude of the communities. However, the previous figures should be read with caution. In the first place, the number of mobilized soldiers was provided by the consular authorities. The European states, according to the jus sanguinis, granted the nationality to the children of their citizens born abroad. Thus, these figures included Anglo-Argentines, French-Argentines, Italian-Argentines, as well as native Britons, French, and Italians. On the other hand, the Argentine national census, according to the jus soli in force in the country, regarded that second generation as Argentine citizens. In second place, the age range recorded in the table did not match exactly the age of recruitment of their respective armies. However, despite possibly inaccuracies or discrepancies, some general conclusions can be inferred from them. The British show an outstanding degree of response to the war effort. The relative numbers of the Italian contingent can give the impression of a high response to the call to arms. Nevertheless, the male population of the colony over 15 years old was almost 13 times larger than the French one and almost 31 times larger than the British one. So the Italian contribution was in fact smaller. Several factors can clarify these differences in the response to mobilization. In our view, two factors influence decisively the degree of response to this. On the one hand, the different scope of the state's nationalism, a result of the differential grade of development of the national state. While Great Britain and France had behind them a long history of political unity and a wide range of resources for nationalization, the Italian unification was more recent, and the liberal state nationalism was weak and incipient. On the other hand, The other factor was the willingness to integrate into the host society. The Italians and the French were well integrated, while the Britons were more resistant to assimilation. This factor was a key issue in the attitude of the second generations towards the recruitment. The second generation of Italians and French, more influenced than the British by the Argentinization process through public education, had a more distant relation with their parents' country of origin, reflecting their concern about the ambiguities of the European states' citizenship law. According to this law, there was an overlap obligation imposed to the citizens born overseas, who also had to perform a mandatory military service in the Argentine army. Despite these tensions, in general, the European belligerent states found in their overseas colonies a significant reserve of military resources, increased by the contributions of volunteers from different ethnic communities with political or circumstantial affinities with their cause. During the Great War, the immigrant communities replicated locally the conflict that involved their nations in the European battlefields. They fought the war from Argentina at cultural, economic, and political levels. A cultural battle was launched from the beginning of the conflict, addressed to conquer Argentine public opinion and to influence their authorities, which had declared a neutral policy that would be held until the end of the Great War. Immigrant communities carried out the dissemination of war propaganda produced by their governments and also allocated part of the war committee's incomes to finance the local elaboration of similar materials. The Allied immigrant communities also developed locally the economic warfare through the implementation of the blacklist against German companies and their local partners. As a side effect, the blacklist damaged the local trade and prompted formal protests from the authorities, which considered them as an assault on the sovereignty of the Argentine state and its neutrality. On the other hand, the economic warfare also consists in the firing of German or Austro-Hungarian workers by British, French, and Belgian companies. At the same time, immigrant communities took an active part in the mobilization of Argentine society during the war. In 1917, the unrestricted submarine warfare declared by Germany and the entry of the United States into the Allied side create a challenge for the neutral policy adopted by the government. The supporters of the severance of diplomatic relations with Germany and those who promoted the maintenance of neutrality create specific associations to pursue their cause and organize massive public demonstrations in the main cities of the country to influence civil society and the government authorities as well. Their meetings received the active support of the immigrant communities. They also coordinated efforts with their equals from the same side in the war or with shared interest about the conflict. In 1918, to improve the outcomes of the economic warfare, Allied communities decided to form an inter-Allied committee which gathered together their chambers of commerce and unified the regulation of the blacklist. Furthermore, another expression of inter-ethnic cooperation with economic purposes took the shape of the fundraising for the Allied or Central Empire's Red Crosses and for different relief initiatives. To conclude, in the first place, the increasing demands of the European states led to the aggravation of pre-existing tensions with their overseas citizens and called into question their ability to mobilize them. In the case of the ethnic minorities from the empires, the war entailed the possibility of reconsidering their connection with those multinational configurations and of reformulating them drastically. In that vein, it was not infrequent that those national minorities converged with their country's adversaries in wartime, whom they actively support in different grounds, including the military one. Without going to that extreme, the Great War posed other dilemmas to the migrants. While the collection of material aid for the soldiers and victims of the conflict was almost unquestioned, the military recruitment raised some objections regarding the participation of the second generation in the European armies. However, not only this generation showed a differential response to the military mobilization. Depending on the community, sometimes the answer of the first generation to the call to arms was low. In second place, immigrant communities exported the war to their host country, contributing to place that issue on the local social agenda. Through the dissemination of war propaganda and the implementation of economic warfare, immigrants transplant to Argentina the conflict, showing its global character and provoking different social reactions. On the one hand, their propaganda activities contribute to the cultural mobilization of Argentine society, appealing to cultural and ideological transnational affinities. On the other hand, the blacklist generated tensions by limiting, in practice, the economic liberties guaranteed by the Constitution, violating the sovereignty of the neutral country. Furthermore, their exchanges with Argentine society took the shape of an active collaboration with the opposite trends of public opinion after 1917. In addition, the European colonies line up with other immigrant communities of the same side in the war, recreating the alignments of their homelands. Through their intersection and interaction with other global and local actors, immigrant communities in Argentina played an important role in the development of the war and in the transformation of their linkage with the two wars in which they were intrinsically involved. Thank you for your attention.